analyst at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being part of the conversation.
Thank you, Yari. Good evening.
Good evening. So let me begin with Dr. Adamu. So you recall, sir, that the first time many Nigerians had the opportunity to meet, you know, of course not personally, but via the media, was the call it small confrontation or at that meeting between the Chief of Army Staff. It was an exchange that looked very, for many people, they left much to be desired beyond that. And also before his time as commander, before his confirmation, his time as commander of the Operation Lafia Dole also came under the spotlight as some of the things that also happened with that. But since his death a few hours ago, we've begun to hear such wonderful news about him, such wonderful story about him. And so we want to go beyond what is available already at the headlines. Can you talk to us a little bit of what you know about the late Chief of Army Staff?
Thank you, Yari. And before then, I would like to express my sincere condolences to his family and the family of the other 10 members of that flight that died, as well as the entire military and the country as a whole. Having said that, General Attahiru has stood out both personally and then as a professional military personnel. He has served both locally as well as internationally in several operations, and in each of those occasions, he has won laurels to show his professionalism. Now, perhaps it's because of that professionalism that in certain instances, like the example you gave in the Northeast, he had some levels of disagreement with some of the other personalities that were involved in the general operations. He is someone who believed strongly in what he's doing. He had a focus, and where there were gaps between his expectations and the focus that he had, he was not shy in expressing those gaps, and most of the persons that worked with him attested to that fact. In terms of the welfare, equipment, as well as the funding of the operations in the Northeast, where there were gaps, he wasn't shy in mentioning them. And as it were, in the military, you have to be very careful in terms of how you respond to some of these issues. But for someone with such a strong personality and who could express himself, even in very difficult situations, it wasn't really surprising that from time to time he had that challenge with some of his superiors. But having said that, he, like I said, has excelled both personally and professionally, and I think that is what the Nigerian Army as a unit, as well as the Nigerian military as a whole, would miss, unfortunately, as a result of this untimely death.
All right, thank you, Dr. Adamu, for that opener. Let's join now Mr. Bukati. Tell us as well what you also know, what you have heard from the reports about the late Chief of Army Staff, and as well there were also 10 other officers and 10 other passengers on that jet alongside him. And we hear that one of them was just married a few months ago. So these are also, beyond the name, beyond their performance in the military, they are also human beings as well. And so we just want to remember them and some of these elements of their life.
Yeah, permit me to start by aligning myself with Dr. Adamu to express my sincere condolences to their families, to the Nigerian Armed Forces family, the institution as a family, but also the entire nation. And you are right that this is not statistics. These are not some kind of, these are not some kind of less human beings or superhuman beings. They were human beings like all of us, and each and every death is a personal tragedy. When I saw pictures of their families, their wives attending the funeral, my heart broke. And this is a reminder of the extraordinary sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, not only the Nigerian military, but also the Nigeria Police Force and other Nigerian security agencies that are putting their lives on the line every single day to protect us and to protect our country. We owe them tribute. We owe them every single, sympathy, and we owe them all the support that we can afford. And I mean, this is just an example of how each and every family is touched. And just as we mourn the death of civilians whenever there are tragedies like this, we should mourn the death of our officers. They are human beings like all of us, with families, with hopes, with dreams, with loved ones, and with aspirations. It is a tragedy deeply, deeply saddening for the nation, and we must remember them and all other families today and every day.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bukati. Dr. Adamu, you know, I agree, and of course every other person will agree that it's still a bit early, you know, but are there any details as a professional as well as an expert that you'll be comfortable to share on the cause of death or the cause of course, we know it's an airplane crash, you know, what were the conditions that probably led to this sad incident? Of course, as some people have said weather, other people have contested this as well, so we just, you know, what would you be comfortable to share, and can you also touch on maybe some specifics about the jets that were involved and the procedure that investigation should follow to unravel the cause of death?
Okay, yes, you're right. It's the
Go ahead, Mr. Adam.
Bit early. However, there are timing of the incident around 6:30 p.m. Second one is the weather. It was an inclement weather. It was raining with heavy thunderstorm. And third one is the circumstances at the airport. We were told they were supposed to land initially at the Mando airport, but because there were no certain equipment that would have aided their landing, they had to go to the international airport, and it was in between those two locations that the accident or incident happened. Another fact, of course, is the type of aircraft. We're told it's a Beechcraft. Nigeria, I think, has about 9 of such aircraft. Now, the circumstances or the conditions of this aircraft, unfortunately, is not known. Over time, it's been documented that air crashes are the result of 3 major things. Number 1 is human error, 2, mechanical, and then, unfortunately, the third one could be as a result of some adverse action by either enemies or, you know, as an example, if they are shot down. So at this stage, it's too early, even though if you look at the debris of the plane from the pictures that have emerged, you would say that it definitely crashed, and because there are like pieces of it that would show it was a crash, as against if it was shot down and the explosion happened mid-air. Also, the witnesses that saw the crash attested to the fact that it did crash. So all of these are preliminary sort of, you know, observations or findings. What would be really instrumental, and I'm very, very happy that the Chief of Defense Staff has ordered an investigation into the development, and I'm hoping that that investigation will be conducted in a professional manner, and that the findings, at least the ones that can be made public, are made public. There is a lot of conspiracy theories out there flying, and the only thing that can bring an end, or at least reduce those conspiracy theories, is a very robust, independent investigation that would address a lot of issues that have arisen so far. And I'm hoping that that is the way to go. Unfortunately, as a country, we do not have a tradition for this type of investigations. Neither do we have a tradition for releasing the reports of such investigation. I think in 2021, in a democratic era, it is time that we reverse this unfortunate tradition and make such you know, reports, at least the aspects that can be made public, so that it would quell, like I said, the conspiracy theories that are going around at the moment.
All right, yes, also let's take this back to Mr. Bukati as well. Thank you, sir, for that, Dr. Adamu. So, Mr. Bukati, what does it say to you? You know, he has mentioned now about investigations that, of course, will follow. What does it say to you when, in just the space of 5 months of the year 2021 alone, we've had 3 jets drop off the sky, and particularly one has, you know, call it disappeared off the radar. We do not know what happened to that jet, nor the individuals inside, or at least what has been made public. There's no information about what happened after. What does this say to you?
No, I think all of these incidents emphasize to us the need for a transparent, thorough investigation into what is causing this. it is very worrying, in fact, alarmingly worrying, that 3 military planes would drop off the sky in a period of 5 months and killing 20 gallant Nigerian soldiers. And if you look at the profile of those killed, they are very senior officers, telling you that plane crashes kill more senior officers than the security situation, the terrorism across the country. And after every single incident, politicians would declare, military leadership would declare that they are going to conduct investigations. But unfortunately, that will be the last we will hear of any investigation. And I think this time around, it is important that we go beyond platitudes and declarations and conduct real thorough investigation. And I support Dr. Adamu's call that aspects of the investigation that can be made public should be made public. Because if you don't give official information, then you are helping conspiracy theories and all sorts of fake news to breed and to spread across the nation. And we have seen that already flying around. And the more we don't do thorough investigation, we don't release official accounts of how things are happening, then you would continue to see these conspiracy theories and fake news making the round when you have incidents like this or others. And so it's important for us to investigate and for the investigation to be made public. What caused this? Is it technical hitches? And if it is technical problem, why? Is it a lack of maintenance? Is it old age? Is it corruption? Is it fault with the planes we are using? Is it a fault with our training? Is it poor training of our pilots, or what? What is it that is causing this? And when we know them, then we take remedial measures. And you are right that we still don't have any official account of what happened and the status with the one that got missing last month in the Northeast. We saw Boko Haram claiming responsibility and showing us the plane in flames. The plane in flames, but the Nigerian military did not tell us what's their official account. Why did it go off the radar? What is happening? For example, one of the theories we have had after the crash yesterday was that it was weather. If commercial planes can foresee weather and refuse to fly or to land when there is a problem with weather or heavy rain, why are our military planes not able to see that? I mean, these are questions that must be answered in a thorough, transparent investigation, and Nigerians have a right to know what is causing this and what are governments doing to prevent future occurrence.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bulama. And so I would go back to Dr. Adamu now, sir. Dr. Adamu, two of yourselves, you have mentioned the need, two of you have harped on it, and it's part of our conversation tonight, you know, the need for official communication, the need for some level of transparency. But let's just finish a roundup on this before we move on to that, you know. And I hope and I expect that a series of changes and a review of protocol will follow. In light to these incidents, but did we need our Chief of Army Staff to die in this way before we think about that, given the fact that we had previous experiences that should have sent someone thinking to rejig the processes and protocols? But take that as the first one. But the second part of it will be, what is the significance of these incidents? Of course, it's a sad one, unexpected, but what role does it play into the fact that the Chief of Army Staff just took office here a few months ago in January, of course, was already bringing to bear his dynamism, his direction, his plans and policies, and of course, the necessary ammunitions and what have you into the war against insurgency and the other challenges we have across the nation. What do you think happens next thereafter?
Thank you. You asked me, I think, two questions. The first one is with regards to protocols. Now, the reality is that the military is not different from the general society that Nigeria is. In other words, all the lapses that the Nigerian society suffer from the military to maybe a lesser extent will be also suffering from that. So name them. Is it corruption? That likelihood. Is it a culture of what I would describe as insolence? Yes, the military too will be suffering from it. Issues around even compliance with protocol, standard operating procedures. Just to give an example of how corruption can play a role in this manner. Maintenance, it's funds that are allocated for maintenance. Now, where a corrupt, either civil servant or personnel decides to siphon a component of that money that is meant for maintenance, or in certain instances where that personnel decides to buy a cheaper, replacement part as against the one that has been approved and that he knows is meant for that particular product. So all of these are issues that are in the general society that unfortunately too, we cannot conclusively say the military has been excluded from it. So it's from that angle that I'm approaching the question around protocols. It's very likely that compliance with protocols is also suffering from this general malaise that is within the society, just like it's in the military. And it doesn't really take much for you to understand that it's the same thing. Walk into any barracks in the country where there are certain laws or rules, and you would see compliance to those rules and laws will not be as much as if, for instance, they were fully ensuring compliance to those rules. So that's number one. It could have led to the accident, but again, only an investigation would reveal that. Number two, with regards to your second question, the implication of the death of a chief of army staff. In a country like Nigeria, where unfortunately the military is playing a key role in internal security, and in this instance, the army, of course, there are 3 units within the military. The army is one of those units, and the army is even playing a bigger role in this internal security role that the military is playing. And then all of a sudden you have the head of that army no more in such a very tragic manner. Unfortunately, it will definitely have an impact. As it were, every time a chief of army staff is appointed, he's likely to introduce new policies, new strategies, just like we've seen with this new, now late chief of army staff, General Attahiru. A good example is he changed the name of Operation Lafiya Dole to Operation Haɗin-Kai. Quite significant, because Lafiya Dole is kind of forceful, while Haɗin-Kai is, calling on you to cooperate, not necessarily using force. So indicating that his approach, his strategy is likely going to be different from the previous approaches. Now he's late. How are we sure that the next chief of army staff will continue with this philosophy, this approach that he has adopted? It's very unlikely. So imagine the significant changes that would occur if the next chief of army staff decides not to continue with that philosophy. Another example I'll give is his decision to change this so-called super camp strategy and return to the forward operating base strategy. That is a significant change too. Now, what happens if the next chief of army staff decides not to continue with that? That means a new strategy will be introduced. So it's quite significant. It speaks about possible policy changes. It speaks about possible strategy shift and several other components. And if you relate it to the current security challenges affecting the country, specifically I would single out terrorism and banditry, and the zeal with which the now late chief of army staff has attempted to address these two issues, then you can understand how his demise is quite significant in terms of internal security operations for Nigeria.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think at this point we'll just take a break so that we can allow ourselves drink water before we come back. But and our part as AIT, we wish the families of the dearly departed all the best in these trying times. Well, we'll be back. Democracy Today continues after this short break. Don't go anywhere. right, thank you for remaining with us on Democracy Today. As you know that on Democracy Today and Africa Independent Television, we remain highly committed to preserving Nigeria's unity, progress and prosperity. Tonight we revisit Nigeria's war against insurgency and the information surrounding the death of Abubakar Shekau, the leader of the terrorist group Boko Haram since 2009. He is said to have radicalized and militarized a once peaceful group. This would not be the first time news of Shekau's death has made the rounds. It was reported first in 2009, but he resurfaced not long after. Following military efforts in 2013, 2014 and 2016, reports that emerged of the terrorist leader's deaths were debunked with videos released by the sect. The news of his death this time, either by suicide or in confrontation with the rival Islamic State of West Africa sect, has been taken with measured reactions. The Nigerian army said it is investigating the reports, with the United States and others refusing to declare Shekau dead. With several sources basing their information on intercepted telephone calls and chatter amongst the sect leaders, we reviewed the implications of Shekau's death and the next steps in Nigeria's war against insurgency. Our guests are still with us and we'll continue immediately with them. We have Bulama Bukati, who's a senior analyst and senior security analyst. So let's begin with you again, Mr. Bulama. You describe Shekau as the world's least understood warlord and its most underestimated. I will have you tell us what you mean by that, but let's begin with the fact that Shekau is a man whose death is yet to be confirmed by the Nigerian army, and as well, as I mentioned now, the US and other countries are not going to take the plunge into declaring his death, given the fact that he has many times in the past reappeared in videos saying, "I'm alive, I'm hale and hearty," and all of that. But how did you take this report now?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to be cautious. This is the 9th time Shekau would die, including 4 official declarations of his death, which he then would later debunk. But this time around is different. All the other rumors and official declarations were declarations made. This time around, it is his own group that is reported to have killed him. And this is not a new intra-group or infighting or intra-group warfare in Boko Haram. It started actually in 2016 when the splinter group ISWAP, that Islamic State West Africa province, broke away from the main Boko Haram, which then led Shekau to lead a new group that was called Jama'at al-Sunnah al Jihad. And since then, they have killed between 400 and 800 fighters in their intra-group warfare. And they have killed senior commanders before Shekau's reported death. So this is an incident that has been going on for years and has killed hundreds of Boko Haram fighters by themselves. And so it's not a new thing. The second thing is that from the information we have already, triangulated information we have already, you can say with near scientific accuracy, maybe 90-95%, that Shekau is indeed dead on this occasion. We have intercepted communications, as you said, but we also have internal group documents, including an audio in which Shekau himself was speaking desperately, complaining reportedly the day before he died on how his very senior commanders were killed and how he was betrayed by group members who claimed to be his supporters and who then were later used to infiltrate his group, but also other pieces of information on the ground pointing to the fact that he is dead. So I would say we can't say 100%, but we are between 90 and 95% sure that Shekau is dead. Now to the second leg of your question, Shekau, like I said, was the longest lasting terrorist leader in the world. No terrorist group that is to the caliber of Boko Haram in the whole world has had a leader that has lived for 11 years. And that was partly because he was underestimated. Shekau would appear in videos speaking like a mad or crazy person, mocking and laughing like someone who is insane, and that's why he was underestimated and misunderstood to be someone who is just crazy. But he has shown us over the last 10 years that he is indeed a smart terrorist CEO who knows how to steer his group, when to get into alliances, when to get out of them, when to speak, what to speak on, and when not to speak. And that's why he is controlling the narrative even after his death today. We are still cautious. We are afraid to say he is dead. He is dead, even though we have information, detailed, compelling information showing that he is dead. So that's partly because of how skilled terrorist he was. And I think that's a lesson for us and for other countries across the world, not to underestimate people just because they haven't gone to school or just because they appear mad or crazy. I think we would do better to assess people's actions and to deal with them based on their actions rather than their behavior, erratic behavior on videos.
All right, thank you. Let's pick this up now with Dr. Dr. Adamo. How did you receive the news of this death? Is this something that you want to wait for more confirmation, or is this something you are sure of? And for you again, what does this signal, for us as a country in the war against insurgency? Is this something that the military should immediately swoop in, and begin to take some very strategic responses? And what should those responses be, really?
Thank you. First off, let me congratulate Bukarti. We are aware that Shekau had placed a death order on him, and so it appears that that fatwa is no longer tenable, given that he is likely to be dead. Like every other, analyst, I'm still waiting for, I would say, the last confirmation. I agree with Bukarti, almost 90% confirmation. But one key confirmation that I'm waiting for is the group that is attributed to have killed him. They do have platforms where they publish such developments, and we are yet to see that in any of their platforms. In fact, we are yet to see them claim the incursion into Sambisa forest. So that for me will be the final sort of confirmation, even if there is no independent verification. Once we see that, then it would sort of corroborate every other thing we've gathered, and then we probably will close that book until we know more. Now, what is the implication of the death of Shekau? It signifies the growing strength of ISWAP. Over time, over the last 6 years, we've seen gradually Islamic State in West Africa growing in terms of membership as well as a territorial influence. Like Bukarti mentioned, we've monitored over this last 4 years thereabout, where there have been clashes between these two groups, and where we have monitored Jamaat al-Ahl al Dawati wal Jihad members moving into the camps of ISWAP, perhaps as a result of the ideological, if I'll use this word loosely, the convincing ideological dispositions of ISWAP against that of Jamaat al-Ahl al Dawati wal Jihad, as headed by Shekau. So that's number one. Number two is the possibility of splinter groups emerging from this development. Shekau does have commanders. One of them that has really proved himself is Bakura, and he has been operating in the border area between Nigeria and Niger. He's still out there as far as we know, and we're not sure what his decision would be. It's likely he will continue with his operations, and it's also very likely that some members of Jamaat al Dawati wal Jihad would move into his camp to strengthen his camp, and so perhaps an increase of attacks from that wing into Nigeria. It's also very likely that some commanders would move outwards into central Nigeria and some other parts of northern Nigeria, especially northwestern Nigeria, these forested parts where already we've seen an incursion of these two groups, both ISWAP and Jamaat al Dawati wal Jihad. Now, if that happens, that means the battlefront for the Nigerian military will be expanded, and it will continue. There is also speculation out there that the cache of arms that Shekau has kept is likely to fall into the hands of ISWAP. Now, if that happens, that means ISWAP will be strengthened, and it would continue its onslaught against the Nigerian military. Now, what is the major objective, the primary objective of ISWAP? If it's growing in strength, both in terms of membership and influence. What is it trying to achieve? Its objective majorly is to establish a Sharia enclave. Already, it has a couple of territories that it has marked out as its territories. Now, if it's able to continue along the line of expansion that we've seen over the last 4 years, it's getting near that objective, unfortunately. And so that means where the conflict in the Lake Chad region that has led to the death of, depending on which figure you want to go with, between 30 to, let's say, 35,000 persons, it's likely going to increase both in the short term and in the long term.
All right, thank you for that. Let's go back now to Mr. Bukati. Mr. Bukati, he has just mentioned some of these. Some of the things I want to take up with you as well. The issues of factions that are beginning to emerge, the issue of the fact that ISWAP might get strengthened, and all of this, and it means that him being the fearsome leader, if he has departed now, is likely to create a vacuum. Are we going to see those who had served under him now try and assert control, regroup, find a new way to begin to attack and continue the jihad and the campaign that he started? And then what? So finally, what should Nigeria and the neighboring countries around us begin to strategize and to take back control and all of that? Well, talk to us about the implications and the need to stabilize the region.
Yeah, so much questions packed in there. Maybe I will just unpack a few of them. And the first is what we hope would happen is for this intra-group warfare to continue. For Ibrahim Bakura, for example, to say he is going to avenge Shekau's death, and then for him to come into the Zambiza forest and face up ISWAP. If that happens, it will be excellent news for Nigeria and the Lake Chad region, because it will be two brutally violent groups eating up themselves, and then the Nigerian armed forces and their partners across the Lake Chad region can exploit the gap and give them a final deadly blow. We hope this intra-fighting would continue to exacerbate with Shekau's death, and we hope that that will be the beginning of the end of this criminal, brutal terrorist organization. But one of the other hypotheses, which is unfortunately not so optimistic, is the fact that Shekau's death could be a window for Boko Haram's reunification. ISWAP has been very clear from the day they broke away that Shekau is the killer, Shekau is the cancer, that Shekau is the tumor in the group, and that they want to remove him. Now that we have almost near scientific certainty that he has been removed, it is possible for ISWAP to extend the olive branch, to invite Shekau's commanders to come and join them so that they will fight the common enemy, which is the Nigerian people and the Nigerian army and security forces. Now, if that happens, it will be even a deadlier chapter that we are about to get into, especially for security forces. We hope that doesn't happen, but it is a possibility, and there are already reports saying almost 70% of Shekau's commander, and there are reports already saying almost 70% of Shekau's commanders and fighters have pledged allegiance to ISWAP and have agreed to fight with them, alongside them, I should say. So if that happens, that will be a deadly chapter we are about to get into. I hope it doesn't happen. Now, one other point we must understand in this factional warfare is that ISWAP is not doing this on its own. It's not doing it alone. ISWAP, from one of the documents I accessed just a few days ago, is implementing ISIS Central's guidance on how to reposition the Lake Chad region or the West Africa province. And so ISWAP's move to topple Shekau, to oust Shekau, is a guidance from ISIS for ISWAP to unify the Lake Chad region. And they did it together with hundreds of fighters that were recently trained from Libya. And that's information I got about 3-4 weeks before, before now, but which I did not go public with. But you could see daily trust, the biggest newspaper in northern Nigeria, with lots of credible sources reporting 2 days ago that it was the 300 ISWAP fighters that were trained that led the fight against Shekau and conquered him. Now, if that's what happened, then we should all be worried. We should all be worried because it means then ISIS Central is trying now to reposition ISWAP by unifying the leadership in the Lake Chad region by sending and by training and sending in more fighters and also sending in more guidance. And unfortunately, that will not spell well for us. And that's something that Nigerians, the multi-joint, and our intelligence agencies must pay attention to. We must make sure that we monitor these developments closely and make sure that we exploit any gap we might have if the intra-group warfare continues, or at least prepare for the worst, because there is credible information showing that ISIS is working to reposition ISWAP and to open even a deadly chapter for security forces in the Lake Chad region.
All right, Mr. Bukati, thank you. We had some challenge with the network, but I think we're able to get the meat of some of what you said. Thank you for that. We'll just move one leg of that question to our Dr. Adamu, while we try to move into the next part of our conversation, because I want to definitely, both of you at the beginning of this program spoke on the need for communication, and I feel that that is an important leg that we should x-ray before we go, because it's not just communication alone on the incident that occurred on Friday, but larger issues around crisis and security communication and things we want to talk, we should talk about as well. So let's just begin first of all by asking Mr. Adamu, looking at the Northeast region and the challenges that Mr. Bukati has outlined for us. Just take this as your first one to say, how do we stabilize that region in terms of bullet points? What should the Nigerian military, what should the Nigerian security agencies be looking at and to take urgent steps to meet, because our focus on this program is the peace, unity, and development of our nation, and to no more have insurgency on our soil and in our borders. And so when you're done trashing that out, also please also look at this leg where, going to the point I raised earlier, the fact that several observers have accused or see the federal government's move to no longer share communication, to no longer share strategies with the public. They say this is counterproductive, because we live in an age that both of you have mentioned, the age of narratives, the age of storytelling, and the age of the fact that if you are not the one giving the correct information, someone else will be feeding wrong information, and we have seen the damage and impact of fake news in the 21st century. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to corroborate what Bukati had mentioned regarding the strategic objectives of IS in the Sahel. This is quite documented, and since the fall of quote-unquote of IS in Syria and Iraq, Sahel has become sort of its new homeland, if I use that word loosely. And in that regard, the Islamic State in West Africa province has been its biggest in terms of expansion faction, and so it appears even within the Sahel there is a focus and concentration on expanding the operations and activities of Islamic State in West Africa province by IS. And like he mentioned, intelligence is very key in this regard. When you have such movements of members or troop strength of about 300 coming from a country like Libya, that should have been detected. Did they come in single-handed? No, they came in most likely with strategy, with tactics, with weapons, and probably with funding to continue their operation. So imagine a situation if we had been able to either block that or even prevent them from arriving. We would have saved ourselves a whole lot of trouble. So that's number one. To answer your question, intelligence is key. there is no reason why 11, 12 years into the counter-insurgency operation, we do not have informants that have infiltrated these groups that would tell us their thinking, that would tell us what their moves are, that even if they sneeze or cough, we know. And so intelligence is absolutely important. And the only way to deploy that intelligence is through understanding the groups, developing an understanding of them that would allow you to operate like them. If you want to beat the enemy, you have to learn to think like the enemy, you have to learn to behave like the enemy, you have to learn the methods and the strategies of the enemy, and that for me is key, number one. Number two, anywhere a terrorist group has been able to survive, it means it's able to exact influence within the environment where it's subsisting. So number two is, how do we remove that influence? The best way to do that is to get the buy-in of the people in that region. How do we get the buy-in of the people in that region? It's through the countering violent extremism mechanism. Incidentally, we do have that mechanism, but we're not implementing it fully. In fact, I'm shocked that even the governor of Borno State, when he speaks, it appears to me that he's not aware that we do have a framework called CVE, Countering Violent Extremism Framework. So I think the federal government needs to take that framework down to the state governors and to the local government level so that the people can buy in to that framework. What does that framework speak about? Three things: economic regeneration of the affected region, counter and radicalization as well as de-radicalization, and then strategic communication. Now, when I come to answer your second question, I'll speak about strategic communication. It ties in with your second question. And then thirdly, and I think more importantly, we need to block the recruitment capabilities of this group. We need to block their funding. We need to block their channels of getting equipment. And there are several ways for which they are getting this equipment. But for time purposes, I'll just leave it at we need to block it. Now, if we're able to do these three things, I believe the strategy in the Northeast will change and we'll start seeing some successes. Our inability to do any of these three things, unfortunately, will mean a continuation of the circumstances and perhaps even a deterioration in the short term and in the mid term, and possibly in the long term. With regards to your second question, strategic communication or the need for government to communicate better its strategies to the people. I spoke earlier on about the countering violent extremism. It's a beautiful document. It was first launched under the Goodluck Ebele administration. It was, I remember very well, the Minister of Finance then, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, went to the UNGA in September 2014, precisely, and in that UNGA assembly, read out the CVE strategy that Nigeria had developed. It was bought into by the world, and before you know it, about 8 countries and several other development partners decided to fund a component of it. One that is very controversial is Operation Safe Corridor. It's from that document. Unfortunately, almost 6-7 years down the road, we're not seeing that type of enthusiasm that should have led to the implementation of that document. I know that the current National Security Advisor has introduced a framework for that document, so suggesting that he himself has brought into the strategy. But that framework, what is missing from that framework is an implementation strategy, and I think it's absolutely important that there should be a clear implementation strategy that identifies the role of state governors, identify the roles of the near missing local government level of governance, as well as individual organizations and stakeholders like the media as an example, as well as market women, name them. Everyone in society should have a role in that. And if you take it down to them and they buy into it, then it will be successful. So communication is absolutely important. The second aspect of communication that I quickly want to mention is propaganda. Wars are won or lost sometimes with propaganda. If you manage information very well to your advantage, then you would have an advantage over your enemy. If you don't, like we're doing at the moment, and your enemy has an amazing propaganda machinery, then we'll be playing catch up, which unfortunately is what we're doing at the moment.
All right, Mr. Bukati, let's go back to you now. Speaking.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to another interesting edition of Lifelines with Mima. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, on this program, we take time to bring to you real-life stories. We take time to deal with everyday issues. We take time to help you understand some of the challenges that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you know what? We're so passionate and believe that change will come from each one of us. And so, we'll not be tired. We appreciate your love and your prayers and your support. We'll not be tired. We'll keep giving you the very best of ourselves. Today, however, I'd like us to treat the issue of parenting. Yes, parenting. This is something that we just assume should come naturally. You should just know how to take care of kids. You should just know how to raise them. That is not always the case. These days, we have learned that just beating children up doesn't do it. Being an intentional parent is a deliberate act. Yes, I meant it. So, there's more after